Boys, today we are looking at the sidearm, also known as the Vanguard ritual weapon, Buzzard. I'm not joking, that's the name. It's just called Buzzard. Kind of funny considering that the icon for Season of Dawn is actually a bird. Looks a little more graceful than a buzzard. Quick fact about a buzzard though, its saliva is actually acidic. Now the quest for Buzzard can be picked up from Zavala. Not a difficult quest, but out of all of the ritual weapons this season, I would say Buzzard is the most unique, and that's actually because it's got a new perk on it brought to us in Season of Dawn. Now first up, this weapon does fall in the adaptive frame archetype, meaning it shoots at 300 rounds per minute. A very consistent archetype. I very much like this. You got weapons like 18 Kelvins, Translation Theory, and of course the beautiful Drang. Now Buzzard here comes with extended barrel for that increase in range, as well as some extra recoil direction, alloy magazine for that increase in reload when the mag is empty, and our first trait here is Outlaw. Precision kills greatly decrease reload time. Underneath it is 4 times the charm. Rapidly landing precision hits will return 2 rounds to the magazine. Interesting perk to have on a sidearm. Now our next trait is actually one of the new traits brought to us in Season of Dawn, Osmosis. Using your grenade ability changes this weapon's damage type to match your subclass until you stow it. A very unique ability with a lot more value than what I originally gave it credit for. Like, I thought it was going to be pretty good, but in the back of my head I was like, I think I would just rather a damage dealing perk. Now if you do want a damage dealing perk, right underneath it is of course Swashbuckler. This weapon also comes with a stability masterwork. Now we're going to actually talk about its damage values from a bunch of different perspectives. Number one, does its damage drop off when you activate Osmosis? As you know, energy weapons in general do 5% less damage than kinetics, at least against unshielded enemies. Of course, the value of those energy weapons go up greatly when dealing with shielded enemies. When you take this wizard right here, who has a solar shield, Buzzard in its kinetic form only hits 785 damage per shot. Now, if this weapon was Void or Arc, like if I threw a Void or Arc grenade, my damage actually increases to 1,495 damage. So still, a very substantial increase from its original kinetic damage. But if you were actually to match the energy by throwing a solar grenade, you would actually raise your damage to 2,232. This is actually a 184% increase here in damage from its original kinetic damage. So yes, something like Osmosis is extremely beneficial. Now, in terms of Swashbuckler, obviously in PvP, this is definitely the route you want to go. One of my favorite things to do with weapons inside of PvP to activate Swashbuckler times 5 is actually just shoulder charge into an enemy. This increases our damage by 33%, and for something like Buzzard, we go from hitting 51 damage per crit and 47 per body to a whopping 68 damage per crit and 48 per body. This actually drops our time to kill value from 0.6 seconds to 0.4. Now, as nasty as that may appear, understand its base default TTK value here at 0.6 seconds is extremely competitive. And since the most recent change to sidearms, all sidearms in general have been feeling extremely good inside of PvP and PvE. The target acquisition overall is much more consistent, which is why when we talked about Rat King earlier, I was mentioning that we may be in a potential sidearm meta. And when we compare stats to stats, Buzzard far outpaces that of Drang. And Drang for the longest time has been like one of my favorite feeling sidearms in the game. The main thing that's kind of hurting Buzzard here is the fact that the weapon is a static roll sidearm, whereas Drang has a number of different perks here you can utilize for something like PvP, which to me makes it a better choice than something like Buzzard. Now for my PvP guys, it's a good chance we'll have a video in the next week or so talking about the best sidearms, but there's a lot we have to test. Now moving on to PvE, I actually wanted to put Buzzard under a specific scenario in which Swashbuckler and Osmosis would go head to head. I would say in most PvE content, when you're not dealing with energy shields, and especially your lower level PvE content, Swashbuckler is probably going to be your way to go. But anytime a burn is introduced, Osmosis on something like Buzzard, hands down, elevates your damage more so than Swashbuckler times 5. This was the part that got really interesting to me. So for instance, if you take the strike playlist from the day, it had Void Burn active. If I was to activate Osmosis, apply Void to my sidearm, this actually would raise my damage from 689 to 927. That's actually a 35% increase there in damage. flat. I'm not having to proc it. I'm not trying to get a kill with it. I don't have to reload. This is just a 35% buff by matching the burn. And since the most recent changes in Shadowkeep to Swashbuckler, the max amount of damage you can get with Swashbuckler inside of PvE caps out at 33%. So the reality is, in any burn scenario, Osmosis hands down wins in this trait-to-trait comparison. And even when you look beyond that, to me, one of the greatest benefits is when you start dealing with match game. The ability to rock the rainbow here, a weapon of every single elemental type, is going to be so valuable in those match game scenarios. And for high-end PvE activities, you have got to match those energy shields or you just won't get past them. Now, our final trait-to-trait comparison is, of course, Outlaw versus 4 times the Charm. Now, 4 times the Charm returns 2 rounds to the magazine after landing 4 precision shots. Now, I would probably rock 4 times the Charm, and this is not a bad sidearm. Like we said, it's got good stats, one of the best stats for an adaptive sidearm, but it doesn't have a magazine perk there that's helping its range or stability. And there's also times where the weapon's recoil can get a little uncontrollable, and this actually resulted in me not hitting my crits, resulting in something like 4 times the Charm to be a harder perk for me to activate, at least consistently, which is why I think something like Swashbuckler or Osmosis pairs just fine with something like Outlaw. Overall, guys, Buzzard is a good feeling sidearm with a definite place in high-end PvE content, especially for my solo players. Like for my solo guys that's running into match game scenarios, it's hell, man. And just simply having the ability to rock the rainbow goes a long way here. And I know it's a sidearm, but really the damage wasn't bad. I didn't really feel like I was missing out on too much, especially in burn scenarios. Now, as far as the best weapons to rock with it, because it's a sidearm, for my PvP players that want to use a sidearm, or even for my PvE players, I very much enjoy Ariana's Vow with it. The weapon has a good draw time, it's snappy, land a single crit with something like Ariana's Vow to get the quick swap, makes for easy cleanup with something like Buzzard. And in terms of range and consistency in something like PvP, it's got good range. It could definitely be better, but I would say there's a cutoff point around 20 meters. Even if it could stretch beyond that, I would not get into gunfights outside of that range, because like I said, there's no magazine perk here that's really benefiting this weapon in terms of that range or that stability. You just got alloy magazine. And so there's like a certain point where the weapon just has a problem with hit registration, despite the buff there to target acquisition. And that target acquisition buff, yes, it's nice, but it seems to be more gauged within like sidearm's intended range. You could tell that Bungie, or at least in the case of Buzzard here, is trying to make sure we don't run into a situation like we did back in year 3 of Destiny 1. Now, granted, all the sidearms that we're going to be going through, the question is what can break that mold? What sidearm can outrange a last word? I know, sounds disgusting. We'll have a Wormwood meta again, boys. So guys, that is the Vanguard ritual weapon. Try it out for yourselves, get your hands on it. I believe we got the Gamut shotgun to cover next, as well as a lot of other new weapons that's got some pretty unique rows on it, especially that grenade launcher. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.